Hey everyone, welcome back to another OKest Recap. We've got a number of things to cover today. We have a new device coming out in Brazil that's based off the AYN Loki that we're going to cover. We have new drivers for AMD and Intel. A bunch of last minute things to cover for the Ally X before it releases. The Legion Go got a new facelift for its software. We have a new device from Onexplayer, a new device from Ayaneo, and a number of cool products to take a look at today. We've got a lot to cover, so let's dive into it. We'll start off with our quick news, and our first bit of quick news that we're going to cover is that new handheld that's based off the AYN Loki, which is going to be launching in Brazil, and it's by a company called Zeenix. There's actually going to be a few different models that are coming out, and they actually line up with the AYN models, which is the Loki Zero and the Loki. So the lower end version is going to be running the AMD Athlon 3050E, and the higher end version is going to be running the 6800U. From what I've gathered, it seems that this device is going to be set up pretty much exclusively for Brazil. I haven't heard anything that it's going to be global, but that could change. I could be wrong on that. If you guys are curious to see what it looks like, I'll quickly show you what it looks like. We have the Zeenix at home, which is the AYN Loki Max, and I picked this up on a trip probably about 2 months ago. And here's the AYN Loki Max. This is actually the first device that I was considering getting when I was looking at getting a handheld PC aside from the Steam Deck. But due to some development delays, like serious development delays, I ended up going with some other devices like the AOKZOE, Onexplayer, and a few others, the Ayaneo 2. By the time that they had actually launched this device, the 7840U is already coming out, so there was no sense in getting the 6800. The device itself, though, is fairly nice. It's very comfortable. There's rear macro buttons. I did find that, I don't know if it's the ventilation, the fan, or the heatsink, whatever it is, I did find that it runs fairly hot. Probably hotter than any of my other handhelds, so that's something that hopefully they'll fix when they release on the Zeenix. But overall, it's a pretty nice little device. Next up for our quick news, we're going to go over some AMD driver updates. That's for the 7840U, 6800U, and 8840U. It's all the same driver package. The new drivers are labeled 24.6.1. They bring new game support for the First Descendant as well as Once Human. We also have expanded Hypertune support for Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth, Overwatch 2, The First Descendant, F124, as well as Outpost Infinity Siege. And on top of that, we got anti-lag support 2 for Counter-Strike 2. And then moving on to the Intel drivers, I'm just going to call this one 0.5762. We have added game support for Once Human as well as Zenless Zone 0. And we also got significant performance improvement for Diablo 4. And that's it for our quick news, so let's head over to our Legion Go updates. For Lenovo, I only have one update to go over, and it's actually a pretty big one. We had a big update to Legion Space that completely overhauled the UI, so we have a completely different looking program. So I'm just going to take you through a very quick overview of what it looks like. Once we open up the app, you can see that it's quite a bit different than the previous one. It's got a much different look. At the top, we have tabs to navigate. We have My, Store, Library, Settings, and Controllers. The store is the same as what we had in the previous version with a new look. You have your game library, there's settings, and there's different tabs at the bottom here. We have performance, display, audio, disk drives, and general. If you go to the controller settings, this is where you can do your button mapping. You can adjust your joystick lighting. You can also adjust joystick settings, trigger settings, and there's a few other settings that you can also adjust. Next, we'll go over to the settings tab, and at the bottom here, we'll click the subsection performance. This is very similar to what we had previously, except with just a different look. Then in the display tab, it's fairly straightforward. You can adjust your resolution, your brightness, your refresh rate, and turn on RSR. Then moving over to the audio tab, it's basically just your speakers and your mic volume. If we go to disk and drives, this is where you can actually do some driver updates directly from the app. And lastly is the general tab, where there's pretty much all the other settings. They've added the battery optimizer. You can also turn off the power light if you'd like. And that's pretty much it for the main app. If we take a look at the overlay also benefits from the UI overhaul. It looks quite a bit different than it did prior, but you do get the exact same kind of configuration and settings. It just looks a little bit nicer now. One thing to note is that pretty much all the settings that are in the main app you can access from the overlay here. It's a little bit easier to get to. The one thing that you won't get access to is just doing your driver updates, but that's something that's not going to be happening super often. So it really shouldn't be a big deal to check the main app for those kind of updates. So what's your thoughts on the new Legion space? I haven't had a lot of time to test it, so I'd love to hear what your guys' experience is. Have you had issues with it? Has it worked very well? And what do you think of the new look? Let's talk about it down in the comments, and I'd love to hear from you. Aside from that, I don't really have any updates for Lenovo, so I'll keep you guys up to speed as I learn more, and if we ever hear anything about that rumored Legion Go Lite. And with that, let's take a look at our updates for the ROG Ally. For ASUS, probably the biggest update is that the Ally X is just around the corner at less than a week away from the time we're recording. I figured this would be a good chance to go over the last few things that we've learned about the device so that we're prepared when it does come out. There are a number of reviewers that have received the device. They've been able to give some first hands-on impressions, but I do believe that there's been some information that they can't share yet. So we really haven't seen too many benchmarks versus the ROG Ally or versus some other devices. That's something that I think we'll start to see very close to launch. And of course, it's something that I'm planning to test out myself. ASUS did a second Q&A just recently where they went over a number of questions that were coming from the community, so I'm going to give you a bit of a TLDR for that. There was a number of things covered, and I believe the video was like 45 minutes long, so I'm just going to give you the main points, and you can check out that video if you want to get some more context. Before we jump into that, I'm just going to very quickly summarize what the differences are between the ROG Ally and the Ally X. Many people are probably aware of the differences, but some may not be, so let's just really quickly cover it. Probably the most glaring difference is the battery capacity. The capacity of the Ally X is double that of the Ally, so you're going to get significantly longer battery life. I'm assuming roughly double. As far as the APU goes, it's running the Z1 Extreme, so nothing's changed in that regard, but what we did see is an increase in the RAM, in the speed, as well as the capacity. Previously on the Ally, we had 16 gigabytes of LPDDR5 RAM at 6400 megatransfers per second. Now we're up to 7500 megatransfers per second and 24 gigabytes. Aside from that, we've also got improved joysticks. They're apparently using a new module that is tighter and larger. I think it's the same one that the Steam Deck is using. As well, they claim that the heat dissipation is better in the Ally X, so we can expect the device to run a little bit cooler. The SSD is also now a 2280 size instead of 2230, so that greatly increases the amount of capacity you could actually put into the device. So it's a nice change going from the 2230 up to the 2280. Aside from that, the color is now black. It's slightly heavier, but not too much, and there is a larger grip, so it's more comfortable to use for most people. So that's generally what's improved in the new device, but there are a few things that we got answered in that video, so let's go over that now. So the first question was, are the joysticks Hall effect? And they are not. They don't plan to do Hall effect joysticks. However, they are aware that there are third-party manufacturers that are currently working on Hall effect joysticks, and that's something that they believe should be compatible. They mentioned that they really wanted to support the modding community so that you could upgrade your allies, so that's very encouraging to see, as we did not really get that opportunity for really putting in Hall effect joysticks into the original ROG Ally simply because of the interference. And speaking of modding, one person had a question if the parts were interchangeable between the ROG Ally and the Ally X, and they are not. There's a number of parts that are different. So although some odd parts may be compatible back and forth, very likely a large majority are not going to be. Somebody else had asked if a 2230 size SSD would work in the Ally, and of course it will. You just need an adapter, so there's no reason that it wouldn't work. The port itself is compatible, so you could just add an adapter to your 2230, clone your SSD over, and you could use your, let's say if you bought a 2 terabyte or something. You could transfer it over. It's not going to be plug and play. You will need to still clone or do the cloud recovery. Somebody else asked, because it has better heat dissipation, whether the TDP would be increased if you could go higher than 30, and they have responded that the TDP is going to be exactly the same. One other thing that they also touched on, it has been kind of the hot topic issue for the ROG Ally, and that's been the SD card readers. So that's something that apparently they've been working on for a number of months. And there's been a number of board revisions where they've changed things up a little bit, tried new things, and they're apparently pretty confident now that a new board revision is going to solve the issue, and that is the same revision that we're going to see in the Ally X, at least the changes that they implemented. In North America, the RMA period for the SD card reader has been extended to 2 years because it was a fairly prevalent issue. And they say that a new revision that's, I think, coming out, I think they said August. My memory is not serving me the best here. You'll have to check the video, but it seems that that board, they're fairly confident will fully fix the issue. So if you have an issue with the device, you should be able to RMA it and be confident that it's going to work. One other thing that they say that they've improved is that the speakers are slightly better on the Ally X. I don't know how much. They just said that it was better designed, so it might be the same speaker, but just in a better setup, I guess. And I'd mentioned it earlier, but apparently the heat dissipation is better in the Ally X. What they did is they apparently increased the thickness of the heatsink. And they also made the blades on the fans a little bit thinner, so I guess there's more of them. Although the fans themselves are smaller, supposedly they're able to move more air. So they did cover a few other things, but I didn't think they were really worth mentioning. But check out the video. I'll drop the link in the description. And of course, if you guys find something I missed, drop it in the comments and let's continue the conversation over there. And my question that I'll leave for you guys is, do you feel that the Ally X is a worthwhile upgrade? Is this something that you're going to pass on, or do you already have a pre-order in? Let me know and let's talk about it in the comments. And that's really all that I have to cover for the ROG Ally, so let's head over to our MSI updates. For MSI, I don't actually have any news items except for the Intel drivers, but they're covered in the quick news section, so feel free to jump back and check that out if you're curious. And with that, we're going to head to our Steam Deck updates. The first accessory to cover today is from Ugreen. It's the 2-in-1 QI2 magnetic charging station for iPhone and EarPods. You can also charge other accessories with the USB-C port on the side, and at the back, you just need to plug it in to supply power. Of course, the main thing here is the charger at the top for your iPhone where it'll snap right on. You don't have to have the phone sit on top. You can actually adjust the MagSafe pad to pretty much go any direction you'd like. So you can put your phone on it facing forward. You can put your phone on horizontally, vertically. It's really up to you. Now a quick review of some of the specs. So for the charge rate, it's 3 amp at 15 watt for QI phone, 7.5 watts for non-QI phone, and 5 watts for wireless earbuds. For compatibility, it works with iPhone generation 12 to 15, the AirPod Pro 2 and 1, as well as AirPod 3 and 2, the Samsung Galaxy Buds, as well as most other QI supported devices. If you're looking to pick it up, check out the links in the description. There's going to be a Prime Day sale for the next couple of days, so make sure to check it out during that time to get the best deal. And our next product is also from Ugreen. This one has 145 watts of total power delivery. There's a button at the front where you can see an LED indicator that indicates the current battery level. It doesn't look glitchy like this in person, it was just my camera the way it picked it up. For the I/O for charging, we have 2 USB-C ports and 1 USB-A, and this one port on the right here is the one that's capable of 145 watt. The battery capacity is a massive 25 milliamp hour. The battery pack itself feels pretty solid. It's got a bit of weight to it, but not too heavy. And going off of my experience with the previous model, this is a pretty solid power bank. Check out the link in the video description. It's also going to be on sale during Amazon Prime days. Thanks again to Ugreen for sending me these 2 products to test out for you guys. Next up, we're going to take a look at a controller, and this one's from Abxylute. It's called the C6. It works on Windows, Mac, Nintendo Switch, Android, and iOS. I've been using this controller as my primary controller for the last couple of weeks on the Nintendo Switch as well as my PC, so I'll let you guys know what my thoughts are on it, and then you can check out the link if you're interested in seeing more. Recently, I've picked up Smash Brothers again to start playing a bit more. I've been having a lot of fun with it, so I decided to use this controller as my primary. I've typically used the Nintendo Switch Pro controller as my primary controller for Smash Brothers, so this one was a little bit of an adjustment, mostly I would say with the vibration. The Nintendo Switch Pro controller's rumble is very well tuned to the game, so I don't know, the best way I could describe it is that the moves that you're throwing out have a lot more impact because they seem to vibrate just the right way. So that's probably the thing that I noticed immediately, as it obviously does not feel quite the same as a Pro controller in that sense. However, it's something that you adjust fairly quickly to, and I didn't really find it to be any kind of distraction. Once I got over that, the controller did all the moves that I wanted when I wanted. There was no difference between it and the Pro controller that I could tell. So as far as my Nintendo Switch usage, which is mostly Smash Brothers, this controller worked perfectly fine. I'd have no issue bringing this to a tournament, or use it if I'm playing in a bit more of a competitive setting. When connecting to PC, you need to use a USB-A dongle, so I'm just connecting it to my eGPU here. And then you just need to select X input by holding the home button and pressing X to switch over to X input mode. Once you do that, you'll see that the dongle stops flashing, and that means it's paired up. I tested out the controller on a few different game types, one of which was FPS, so I chose Halo to demo for that, and I found that the controller worked fairly well. Like, I didn't really have any issues with the controller holding me back. Admittedly, I don't play a lot of FPS games, so I can't really say whether the controller would be like great for competition. But for someone that just casually plays, I didn't really have any issue. There was no real input delay, and the joysticks felt fairly accurate. And lastly, I played some Cyberpunk, and once again, controller felt totally fine, felt like I was using just an Xbox controller, no real differences that I could tell. When it came to driving or even just combat in Cyberpunk, I didn't really have any issues with the controller. It felt pretty good to use. Again, the best way I could describe it is it really just feels like an Xbox controller. And just a quick overview of the controller itself. It's a fairly nice looking controller, fairly straightforward. Again, looks very much like an Xbox One controller in shape and in size. The controller is very similar to an Xbox layout with a couple of extra buttons, like down here at the bottom. One of them is a turbo button and another one is the program button. The joysticks are Hall effect and they feel pretty good. The D-pad is nice and stiff, feels really good to use, and the buttons also feel pretty satisfying. The top bumpers are fairly clicky, and the triggers feel fairly clicky. Kind of reminds me a bit of a mix of the Xbox One controller as well as the Xbox 360. The triggers are Hall effect. They did feel a little bit loose for my taste though. I wish they had a little bit more tension, so keep that in mind. They reminded me a bit of an Xbox 360 controller. The controller itself is also super light, so whether you like that or not, just keep that in mind. I didn't get around to testing on iOS or Android, so I can't really speak to those, but from what I did use the controller for, I found that it did work fairly well. If you're looking for a low-cost second controller, this is one that I would say is definitely worth checking out. I had no issues with it, seemed to work fine for me. Just keep in mind that it's a little bit light and the triggers feel a little bit loose for my taste. A special thank you to Abxylute for providing this controller for testing. And the last product to go over today is actually an accessory from my most recent review of the VITURE Pro and the VITURE 1, and this is coming from ROG. ROG specializes in prescription lenses for various XR glasses as well as VR headsets. So they reached out after seeing my previous VITURE 1 review to see if I'd be interested in trying out this accessory, and I do actually have glasses, so it was a perfect fit to give it a try. For the VITURE 1 and VITURE Pro, you get this magnetic clip-on. That's the style that they have. So when putting it on, all you need to do is basically just open up the arms here, and it will just magnetically click onto the back here. Once you've got it magnetically clicked on, it seems to work just no differently than if you weren't wearing it. I didn't find that there was any level of discomfort with having this added on or that they were bumping against my eyes or anything. And my prescription isn't very strong, so I didn't find that it was a major difference, but for those that require stronger glasses, this is definitely a must. As mentioned earlier, they have a bunch of different inserts for VR headsets as well as AR and XR glasses, so take a look at the website, see if there's anything there that interests you. And I'm also going to be getting a coupon code, so once I get that, I'll drop that in the description as well as the pinned comment. Thank you to ROG for sending this out for me to test out. And that's it for the products, so let's take a look at our Steam Deck updates. For the Steam Deck, the only updates that I have is for SteamOS, so let's take a look. We have a few to cover. So the first one is on June 28th, and this is for the beta client update. This one has to do a lot with game recording, the first one being a bug when you were trying to send the recording to your phone. And there was also a couple bug fixes for recordings and screenshots. The dialog context menu was sometimes opening a new window, as well as fixed a file extension that wasn't being applied automatically when saving. Then an update to the non-beta Steam client. So this was on June 28th as well. It fixed a potential crash when Bluetooth pairing request times out. It also fixed a status that wasn't popping up for allow awake from sleep for supported Bluetooth devices, as well as the on-screen keyboard not automatically hiding when you're playing in game. Then on July 2nd, we had another update to the beta client, once again kind of revolving around game recording, so it seems like they've sorted out a few bugs relating to that. And then on July 10th, we had another update. This is to the main client, kind of incorporating a lot of the changes that we saw in the beta, largely revolving around game recording. Aside from that, I don't have any other updates for the Steam Deck, so let's head over to our AOKZOE and Onexplayer updates. For AOKZOE and Onexplayer, I have a couple things to go over. The first one is actually a new model of the onexfly, which has the 8840U, which was just randomly announced this week and is now available to purchase on their Onexplayer store, so check that one out if you're in the market. The onexfly is probably one of my favorite handhelds, so I definitely recommend taking a look. And speaking of 8840U devices, I got a chance to try out the X1 Mini from Onexplayer, so I did a review of that one just recently, so take a look if you haven't had a chance. It's definitely an interesting device. It has some things that it does very well and a few things that I think it could do better, but check out that video if you want to learn more about my thoughts on it. And lastly, we have some new AMD drivers, which I covered in the quick news section, so if you're interested in hearing more about that, jump back to the quick news and check it out. And that's all that we have for Onexplayer and AOKZOE, so let's check out Ayaneo. For Ayaneo, we have a new product that they've just announced that actually looks very similar to the device that I'm using in the background here. The device I'm using is the Ayaneo 2, which is the base design for the new device that they're calling the Ayaneo Pocket Evo. To give you a bit of an idea what the Ayaneo 2 looks like, it's a pretty sleek looking device. It's not perfect. There's a few things that I don't like about the joystick placement. They have it directly below the ABXY buttons as well as directly above the D-pad. The device itself looks fairly clean. It's got the glass front that covers the entire front of the device. I did find that the triggers were a little bit kind of clicky. They didn't really have a lot of tension, and the bumpers, they weren't really my favorite. But aside from that, it seemed decent. The D-pad was nice. It has an SD card at the bottom. Overall, was a pretty solid 6800U device. The Pocket Evo seems like it slightly addressed the issue that I had with the joysticks being just right below, so I'm not sure how comfy it'll be with them with the offset that it has now. It looks like a fairly minimal change, so maybe it'll make a difference, maybe it won't, we'll have to see. The Indiegogo page for the preview is now live, so if you wanted to sign up for emails to get notifications, you can do that now. I'll leave a link in the description. And here's a quick rundown of the specs. First of all, keep in mind this is running Android, not Windows 11. The chip used in the device is the Snapdragon G3X Gen 2. It has a 7-inch 1080p display that's OLED. We have Hall effect joysticks and triggers, HD linear motors. We have an 8000 something milliamp hour battery, as well it has iSpace. So if this device has piqued your interest, feel free to check out their Indiegogo campaign or their Discord server, and you'll be able to get the updates as they come in. And that's all that I have for Ayaneo. Let's head over to GPD. It was another quiet news cycle for GPD, so I don't have anything to report on. I'll let you guys know once I hear more from them. And with that, we're going to wrap up this recap. I hope you enjoyed this video and thank you for watching.